And welcome to Take Action News with David Schuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, and we have a breaking midweek news update on the protests that are sweeping across the entire nation of Turkey today. Reporting to you live from the studios, We Act Radio studios in Anacostia. We have with us on the line right now two activists from Turkey that are participating in the protests that have swept across that country since Friday, when an attempt by local protesters in Istanbul to occupy the Gezi Park in Taksim Square, which was slated for destruction in order for there to be built a mall that was modeled after an Ottoman military barracks. That protest was violently confronted by the police. The images of police brutality were seen across the nation, and in part, that inspired, and through social media, protests all across the entire 80 million nation of Turkey, including in some of the more conservative parts of the country in eastern Turkey. And there are still reports of tremendous police brutality. The Turkish Human Rights Association reports that it believes over 1,000 protesters have been treated inhumanely, that some 3,300 people were detained since the beginning of the protests on Friday. And we can now report that at least 2 protesters have been killed, according to the Associated Press. Just yesterday, Abdullah Jomert, the 22-year-old member of the Republican People's Party, an opposition party, was apparently, we now believe, beaten, and the wounds he sustained from that killed him. It was originally believed that he was shot, but it looks like the provincial government is now saying that he was beaten to death in that particular case, and this was in Ankara, the capital of Turkey. We have joining us right now Sean Hobbs, who's an American writer living in Turkey for many years and a multimedia journalist. He is the editor and founder of Istanbul Voices. And you can read his blog and his work and his multimedia journalism at istanbulvoices.org. Sean, thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to be here. Very, very happy. Thank you for having me.
Also joining us is Samet Atasoy. Samet is a student, writer, translator, and contributor to Kaos.gl. It's a Turkish gay and lesbian blog, and he is joining us from Ankara, Turkey, the capital of the country. Samet, thank you so much for joining us as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
So, Sean, I want to talk to you first because I read your piece and about sort of the different freedoms that it's called Different Freedoms, Politics of Revolt in Turkey. I encourage all of our viewers and listeners to go check it out at istanbulvoices.org. And Sean, you're essentially saying that you've been in Gezi Park at the original occupation that got this entire thing started, these massive protests now against the government of Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan. And you say essentially that there are kind of the classic secular nationalists from the old Turkish elite that were sometimes associated, maybe it's fair to say, with that sometimes had the sympathy or the protection of the military establishment, and hold their and believe very strongly in the legacy of Ataturk, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, who founded Turkey as a modern nation in 1923, and yet they're coexisting with religious protesters, with Kurdish nationalist protesters, with leftists who don't share their nationalism, and yet they're peacefully commingling. Tell us what that was like to see that, and why that's unique.
Well, I think it's really, I've never seen anything like it in Turkey, and I think it shows that we're living in an entirely new country. The fact that for the last 10 years, the Kemalist group that you're talking about, these are the secular nationalist group that are, as you said, strong supporters of Ataturk's legacy, will have many meetings. And there were meetings that were more or less ignored by the government and ignored by the general populace, because they were, in some ways, about 20% of the population, maybe. The numbers can change, but they didn't represent a strong enough number to demand social change. But what's occurred in a spontaneous manner is that these different groups, as you listed, Kurdish nationalists, or at least Kurdish rights supporters, leftist groups, the gay, lesbian, and bisexual community, everyone's together at one point, and everyone is viewing each other. Maybe there isn't an idea of solidarity. Maybe that might not be possible, or maybe it will be possible in the future. But at least there's an idea of cooperation. there's an idea of acceptance, there's an idea of tolerance, and it's something that I just really didn't see in Turkey. Perhaps Turkey needed an Islamicist, neoliberal government to galvanize these other voices over the last 10 years.
Well, Sean, it's such a good point, and I want to get a little bit deeper and provide a little bit more background for our viewers just on that point, which is that the current Prime Minister of Turkey, Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has been Prime Minister since 2002, and some believe that he's been the most powerful leader of Turkey since the founder Ataturk, and his Justice and Development Party, the AKP party, if I got that correctly, is essentially a moderate Islamist party that believes in some strengthening of the government's support for religion and perhaps involvement in Islam in the country, or at least support for religious residents and public displays of religious behavior. And also, at the same time, a tremendous boom of capitalist economic development. And some have called it, I believe, the phenomenon of cultivating previously working class or peasant religious Turks from the Anatolian countryside to enable them to gain wealth. Some people have called and creating a network for them to do that. Some have called that green capital. If that's a term that is sometimes used, green, I guess, being a color associated with Islam. And essentially, I think that people believe that this is indisputable, that in this country of nearly 80 million people, since 2002, the Turkish economy has actually grown by 50%. Now, whether that's being shared justly, we can get into, and what the implications of that have been are obviously very important, but it certainly has reduced, if not altogether eliminated, Turkey's debt to the IMF, which it was indebted to for a long time. And the per capita income, the per capita GDP rather, of Turkey is $15,000 a person. So we're talking about roughly twice the size of Tunisia, a country that actually overthrew its not democratically elected ruler. And of course, Turkey is democratically elected. Prime Minister Erdogan has also come under fire for, he did brush back the military establishment, which for many years exerted a subterranean influence on the democratically elected governments. Some people believe that he did it too forcefully through show trials, but he's certainly put a check on their power. Other people have also noted that he's actually gone after all press that disagrees with him, including, for instance, CNN Turk, which is Turkey's affiliate CNN's affiliate in Turkey, fining them $2.5 billion for giving him critical coverage. And some believe that that's the reason that when this Occupy Gezi protest broke out, CNN Turk was showing a penguin documentary. So one of the reasons that the Gezi Park, specifically the destruction of Gezi Park for this shopping mall, became such a flashpoint is because there's so few green spaces left in Istanbul. It is a city with 1.5% green spaces. Just for some perspective, New York City has 17% green spaces. So I want to ask, I mean, I'll continue just with you a little bit more, Sean, and then I'll get Simon's perspective, but people are wondering, Americans are trying to wrap their head around this. Is this about environmentalism? Is this about the capitalist agenda of Erdogan? Is this about the creep of too much Islam in the public sphere, or restrictions on purchases of alcohol and public displays of affection? Is it social issues? Is it economic issues and environmental? Is it a combination of all three? What role are minorities like the Kurds playing, Alevi Muslims? Because obviously one of the more controversial proposals of the Prime Minister is to build a third bridge over the Bosphorus, apparently named after a controversial Ottoman Sultan, Yavuz Sultan Salim, if I got that right, who was known for persecuting Alevi Muslims, which is a minority that some people estimate to be between 10 to 40% of the Turkish population. And they are not considered among Prime Minister Erdogan's supporters, and some believe that that's a reason why they've been targeted.